Hey, what's up, everybody? This is the first time I've done this, and I'm like, I think I'm gonna do it. And you know, I have a YouTube channel that I started forever ago, and I've put some stuff up on it from time to time, but then stopped doing it. I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago. Oh wow! And you know, I want to like make some videos on some things, but I don't want to like trouble our video guys, and I don't want to you know, put videos where I'm just kind of talking up on the Abolitionist Rising channel, because then, you know, I might mess with the algorithm there. You know, like these videos are not going to be as popular as videos where I'm like talking to people on the streets, and like that's what people mainly want to watch. But anyway, so I'm here on the University of Oklahoma campus. I've got myself a very messy banh mi sandwich here. And it's gonna come out here, eat a sandwich, and then talk about something I've been thinking about. I don't know if it'll be edifying to other people, but it could be. So I'm gonna record it. But along with that, I'm going to talk about this sandwich first. Wow, this is good. This is a banh mi from the Pho House Vietnamese kitchen on White Street here in Norman, Oklahoma. Man, that first bite was awesome. This is the kind of food that my wife likes, and I feel bad that I'm eating it without her. But it's got like jalapenos and lemongrass beef and carrots, and I probably can't pronounce some of the stuff. But anyway, sorry you're watching me eat a sandwich. I'm gonna get to the point of this video here in a second. I need to learn how to edit out some of this eating, because I'm not going to make you watch me eat a whole sandwich. This is a good sandwich. Vietnamese coffee. This is real good. So I know a lot of people that are watching this don't live in Norman, but if you're ever in Norman and you're looking for a banh mi, Pho House, and good Vietnamese coffee. But not what the video is about. Before I get into that, the store is right over there that I got this sandwich. Just stepping out of the office. I'm trying to keep a very normal schedule, and I can't afford to eat lunch like this every day. But once a week or so, whenever I can go out to get lunch, I think I'm going to do this and just put it up on YouTube. And if it gets like 10 views, cool. But the reason I'm filming here, not only because it's close to where I got my sandwich, but behind me is the Physical Science Center here at the University of Oklahoma. And I used to have an office in that building. And I was a graduate student in the history of science. And you know, I was a Christian, but I was not. I think let me just share my testimony, a basic testimony. I think the Lord pursued me at a pretty young age. I can remember all the way back to whenever I was like 10 and at Falls Creek, and heard the message of the gospel, salvation in Christ alone, and that he came and died for our sins, went on the cross, was punished for our sins, and that if we believed in him, we would, you know, not perish, have everlasting life, be with him when we died and went to heaven. And I think I understood that, and I think I actually understood that here and now we'd actually be blessed, you know, we'd be able to walk with Christ here and now. And know him and have eternal life, and be able to fight sin. But that was when I was 10, and I actually went down and responded to a message at Falls Creek in Oklahoma, sort of like a Christian camp. And I remember it was hot and there were big fans, and the song that was playing was that "Though None Go With Me, I Still Will Follow." I remember that, and I went down and filled out a card and talked to someone at the stage, and then went backstage, and they asked me some questions, and I affirmed them all right, and they said, "Hey, well, you're saved." And I think maybe a month or so later, I got baptized at Village Baptist Church in Oklahoma City, in the village, kind of in the Oklahoma City, Nichols Hills type area, like around Lake Hefner. Village Baptist Church. Got baptized there. I think the pastor that immersed me, was named Ted Kirsch. I don't know anything about him now. I think I'm saying his name right. But anyway, I think that God was calling me, the Spirit of God was calling me in that Falls Creek thing. And I think that I was obedient, and I went down because something that the Spirit of God was doing in my life. And I believed that I needed to confess my sins and put my faith and trust in God, in Christ, in what he did on the cross. This is a great sandwich, but it's very messy. Sorry I'm making you watch me eat it. But from about 10 to around 17, I was probably a pretty standard kid. I'm not going to go into my whole family background or whatever, but my parents were standard, what I thought were standard religious, people. We went to church. There were Republicans. I played Nintendo and watched G.I. Joes and Ninja Turtles and all that kind of stuff. We were not cut off. I wasn't raised in one of these families where we didn't do all these different things. I think we weren't allowed to watch The Simpsons when it came out, and I remember that. But we were a church-going family, but it wasn't the most important thing to my dad. I could see that. My dad had a Bible, and he put it on the side of his, like on the couch, and the stand next to the couch, and he would sit there and stuff. But he never really talked about the Bible. It wasn't really a thing. But we went to church. My mom was a little bit more. Maybe she brought things up, but not really ever in any kind of significant fashion. But jalapenos are really good on this. They're not too strong. It's really good. But my mom, she definitely was like a figure in my life. She was my mom. My dad was not there. My dad was living a double life. My dad was a closeted homosexual and had been molested as a child by I'm just reporting what he said, but had been molested as a child by a Boy Scout leader, and that had screwed him up pretty royally. And rather than getting help from his mom or his family or anything like that, I think that began a lifelong sin. And he responded to it in a way that, eventually that he yielded to it, gave into it, and began practicing homosexuality in secret, and not putting that to death, but not, I don't know if he ever really did anything to seek help or anything, but at various times he got in trouble with my mom, I'm sure, found out about it from things that I've heard, and always, would say that, hey, he's going to get a hold of that, and he never did. I think he made a practice of it, carried it out in secret, and it consumed him to the point where he was eventually arrested for meeting with undercover cops in public parks, and it basically destroyed my relationship with them, my family, to a large part, because you find out the reason that you don't know your dad and your dad's not around and never in the picture is because he's living this double life. And everything becomes clear as to why your dad didn't take you hunting or play catch with you and all that kind of stuff, because your dad was not really living for you. So there's a point in why I'm saying all this stuff. But between 10 and 17, my parents, I think they were putting on a religious facade. My mom knew about my dad, but kind of enabling him. And they took us to churches, and we went to churches, and we kind of bounced around a lot. And it probably had to do with that, but took us to churches. And I think there was a certain grace from God in that we were still going to churches and being around people and influences. And so I was still hearing the word of God taught, preached, and, it is true. And even if the hypocrites are taking you there, you still hear it and it's true. And so, I do thank God for that. And I appreciate that my parents did that, even if they were doing it out of hypocrisy or something. Maybe I could be more charitable and say they were doing it out of both hypocrisy and a desire to do what's right. But anyway, I at about around 16, 17, like all 16, 17-year-olds, I was, you can't tell it now, but I was like massively into basketball. It was like basketball is my life, 5-6 hours a day playing basketball. Come home from school, play basketball till it's night and go to bed. So I was massively into basketball and, kind of wanted to do that, be in the NBA, I lived through the Jordan, I watched the Jordan, three-peat and all that. But what I ended up doing around 17, dating girls. I was dating an older girl, playing basketball, dating an older girl. And by the grace of God, I was fooling around with this girl. I don't put anything on her. I was a young teenage kid, even though I was like a Christian in the sense of I do believe that, I was going to heaven because of what Christ did, not because of my good works. My works weren't good, I was, not to be too, trying to get with girls, that sort of thing. But, by the grace of God, we didn't go all the way ever. Probably would have, but eventually, that relationship had to end and got caught. I think that I had written some like love letter or something like that, and my mom did find it in my jacket or something like that. This is all a little bit foggy, but I remember meeting with her dad. Her dad was a pastor, by the way, an associate pastor at a church, and he was a nice guy and everything. But I remember meeting with him, and what are you guys doing? You guys getting close to premarital sex, and you got to stop this relationship. And that relationship ended, and it was kind of like my life ended because like that was my relationship. Shortly thereafter, similar time, I kind of massively rolled my ankle, sort of like dislocated my ankle in a pretty bad way. And it ended up ending my basketball career. At least, my high school basketball dream to be, a junior and a senior and play basketball, play for Central and then Norman North, wanted to play for Norman North and be a part of that first. And that didn't happen. You know, I ended up not doing that. You know, I was able to sort of play some church league stuff and everything like that. But as I was beginning to peak as a basketball player, you look at me now and you're like, whatever. Yeah, you know, 6'1" white high schooler. I was dunking on people. In fact, I was dunking on a guy when I came down and landed on his ankle. And that was that. There's a point to this. And, well, what ended up happening there is that I lost my girlfriend, was in trouble with my parents, didn't yet know my dad was the homosexual, living a double life or anything, but I was in trouble with my parents, in trouble with, that pastor and at the church. It was kind of embarrassing, I guess. And then I was also not going to be a basketball star. So at the high school that I was in, there was only one class open and available for the block scheduling end of the day class, which would have been basketball. And so I had to do something besides basketball, because I wasn't going to just sit on the bench and watch the other guy, the other point guard, shooting guard, that was going to have my spot. I wasn't going to watch him, learn the plays, then try to still be on the team later on. So I was like, well, what's available? And the school counselor was like, there's like a home ec class, and then across the hall, there's like a studio art class. But you can't be in studio art because that's for seniors and people who've already been through like Art 1, 2, and 3, and you haven't even done Art 1. So they made me take home ec. But I was like, you know what? I can draw, though. I can draw. It wasn't like something I was doing a lot, but I had a background in like drawing Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joes and stuff like that. Something that might figure into this story a little bit. When I was young and puberty was on setting, I remember finding like a JCPenney's catalog or a Victoria's Secret or something like that, and drawing scantily clad women, even though I didn't know what a woman looked like naked. Like drawing scantily clad women and get in trouble for it. But I could draw it well enough that like kids at school would want to buy my drawings of Ninja Turtles and scantily clad like women in lingeries or bathing suits or whatever. I bet you they were probably pretty poorly drawn at this point, looking back on it. 12, 13-year-old drawing, but good enough for other little kids. So that was my life as a pornographer. I was a pornographer at 13, former pornographer. Actually, but didn't know how to draw the naked parts, because I was just working off of a JCPenney catalog. But later on, unfortunately, I did find, I not really thought about this much, about how evil this is, but I did find at some point in time a penthouse that someone had. I just imagined somebody somewhere struggling and wanting to stop looking at porn, or maybe they're getting caught or something like that. They had thrown a penthouse magazine out a window, and it had ended up in a storm ditch or something near my house, and I found it at about 14 or 15 or something like that. And that was seriously evil. So anyone who's fighting porn and thinking I gotta get rid of my porn and don't throw it out the window, you're just cursing some kid somewhere. It's better for a millstone to be thrown around your neck. So if you are throwing that sort of stuff away, really throw it away. Well, that'll all figure into this. But basketball career was over, girlfriend was over, life was over, and I was at this point in time, a church called Trinity Baptist Church here in Norman, Oklahoma. Been kind of involved or whatever, but the youth minister wasn't super serious there. But we got a new guy, and he came in, and I remember him saying something about, talking to me, and I had said something about how, as far back as I remembered, I always loved Narnia, and that I wanted to be in Narnia. that Narnia was my ideal, like, place of joy. The place if I could die and go somewhere, yeah, I know heaven's real, but like, I hope it's like Narnia, And what I liked about Narnia was Aslan, Aslan's there. And Lewis, what he was doing with that, people debate different things, but one of the things he was doing with that was trying to get people to see and understand what it was like to know the Lord and who he was and how he was. And so a lot of the attributes of God and the character of Christ are illustrated in the character of Aslan, But anyway, I mentioned that to this youth minister. He probably doesn't even remember this, but he had mentioned, well, have you ever read any of these books by C.S. Lewis, who writes books for adults and theology books and Christian books and really good stuff? And I was like, no. So he said, you should read Mere Christianity. So I read Mere Christianity. And there's a line in Mere Christianity about reading the Gospels, about reading the New Testament. And so I read the New Testament. I read the Gospels. And even though I had gone down at 10 and considered myself a Christian, I do believe that had I died between 10 and then, would have entered into heaven because of what Christ had done, and that I had responded in faith, and that I had believed in him and in his name, not my own. I believe that I would have gone to heaven. But also I believe that I didn't die. So I hadn't died yet. God wasn't done with me yet. And so he obviously wasn't done with me, and I wasn't fully sanctified or perfectly holy or anything like that. Certainly not perfectly holy now. But anyway, I read the Gospels, read Mere Christianity, and believed that I needed to make it true again, that I needed to state it clearly. And I don't think I used the word recommitment, but that I wanted to, before God, there on the side of my bed, kneel down, on my face before God, confess my need for him, my faith in him, and commit myself to follow Christ all my days. So that was about 17, right? And so I did that, and I would say at that point, I noticed a certain change, and the change was I went from being like sort of all basketball, all girls, that sort of thing, to interested in theology and apologetics and debating Christianity and all that kind of stuff. And so from about 17, 18, finishing out high school, I became very interested in that, interested in evolution and creation, intelligent design, all that kind of stuff. And then I went off to college. I forgot to put one little bit. In that home ec class, across the hall from the studio art class, I basically, whether this is sinful or not, I'll leave it up to you. I basically was not a very good home ec student, but I just sat in the home ec class drawing all the time. So I was drawing this drawing, and I was just every single day drawing this. And by providence, the art class, the studio art class, was across the hall. And the art teacher there, his name was Mr. Leaf, and this is my, my junior year, was walking through and saw me drawing this drawing that I was doing in home ec like 2 or 3 weeks into the semester, and then said, wow, this is really, really good. Have you ever taken an art class? And I was like, well, I was actually trying to get into an art class, but this is my only block that I have available. And he was like, well, then you come on in. And he let me come into studio art without having taken the early art classes. Maybe made it, I was in art 1 during the studio art slot or something like that. So he advanced me so I could take it, and so I did that. And then my senior year, basically all my electives were like art 1, 2, 3, 4, studio art, 3D art. So I just did nothing but like art, and skipped chemistry and algebra and everything. I just did all art. And it was with the next teacher, the incoming teacher. Her name was Miss Shaw. And anyway, so they let me do a bunch of art, and I went from like a jock, basketball obsessed person to an art person, like overnight, and then made a portfolio of art work, slides of artwork, and then submitted them to the University of Oklahoma, because I lived in Norman, and the University of Oklahoma, the painting program here, the art school here, accepted me and gave me a big time scholarship, their big incoming art scholarship. I think it's called the Selma Nafee Award or something like that. And so I came into the program with an art scholarship, some money to pay for, school and supplies and all that kind of stuff, and ended up at the University of Oklahoma as an art student, and now an art student who loved reading theology and apologetics and debating Christian, ideas, biblical ideas. And so I started at the art program, which is just right over here on the other side of this building. And my art was very theological, it was very philosophical. It's getting cold out here now. Very philosophical, theological type art. And I did pretty well at that, but I think towards the end of my sophomore year, I wasn't a great student. We had a drawing 2, my second drawing class. I just never went. It was like new drawing, and I was like, I just don't want to draw old naked people. They were probably like younger than I am now, but like just wasn't into it. And my paintings, I could just like paint anytime I wanted to. And so I was like painting this stuff that was all designed to like get into debates. And so like each time that we put our art in front of each other for critique at the end of the week or whatever, debates would start in the class. And eventually my painting teacher, Louise Jones, is no longer with us, I don't believe. She said, why don't you take a philosophy class and get some of this philosophy out of your system? So I did, and I took a philosophy class, and I got real into philosophy, philosophy, apologetics, Christian philosophy. And I did that, and was doing that well, and eventually decided to stop doing the art, because I could get an art degree, but like I could do art anyway. And like I mean, no knock to people who are doing art programs, but I was like a painting major, and I could paint and learn how to paint and work on techniques and stuff and make painting and maybe even do that as a living someday, but didn't need a degree for it. So I shifted from art, which I was like a painting with a minor in lithography, and I basically taken all the lithography classes for that. And so I left and then went to philosophy and was doing philosophy. And so for the next 2 or 3 years, I did philosophy hardcore, did all my requirements, and I was one of these sort of like super senior guys. Met my wife whenever I was a senior, and she is a freshman, and she's been the greatest sanctifying tool that God's ever given me in my life. Met her. I was 4 years into school and really hadn't dated and really wasn't into it. This will figure into this, but just didn't really pursue things like that, because I was kind of pursuing Christian philosophy, apologetics, thinking, all that kind of stuff. And I eventually had a philosophy professor in like sort of a philosophy of language type course, or he was the philosophy of language guy, and I don't think he would know me or remember me or anything like that, but he said something to me about my papers weren't very good, because I kind of argued from the history of ideas. Sorry, I gotta talk loud over these bells. I argued from the history of ideas and history in general, And he suggested that I take a history class, and he knew that I was into science, so he just kind of said, like, why don't you take a history of science class? And so I took a history of science class. And there was that coming semester, there was a science and religion class with a guy named Stephen Weldon. Professor Dr. Stephen Weldon here still has his office back here. He's the chair of the history of science program now. And it was awesome. I loved the course. I think I put pretty headlong into it. Picked up a history of science minor along with my philosophy in the last year. Graduated with philosophy and a minor in history of science. Great history of science program here at OU at that time, and they were really pushing to get minors. And I decided, I do like arguing from history ideas, because I believe that true ideas work and false ideas don't work, because the way God designed the world, and that God is rational and made us rational and his image bearers. I could go into it in other videos. So anyway, I'm getting cold and I need to get to where I'm going. So what I ended up doing is I married my poor wife, marrying a guy who wanted to be a basketball player, who became an artist, who then went to philosophy, who then went to history of science, and then wanted to be a history of science professor, which doesn't sound all that lucrative, but at least it's a professor at a university, and that's pretty awesome. So she married a guy who would be a professor at a university. And so, we would have that professor lifestyle, be around college campuses, students, and that sort of thing. And well, I started my college, or my master's degree here at the University of Oklahoma, and within a few years finished the master's program, and my thesis was on Asa Gray. I'm really cutting down the detail here because I'm getting cold, but I wrote a thesis on Asa Gray, who was a 19th century Harvard botanist and friend, kind of pen pal with Charles Darwin. And I had studied Charles Darwin a bit in sort of like the area of Christian apologetics and intelligent design and that sort of thing, was into that. Even back as an undergraduate, there was a lot of that. That was kind of like my hobby horse, intelligent design, creation, evolution, all that kind of stuff. And anyway, so Asa Gray was a teleological evolutionist who was trying to sort of Calvinize Darwinism. Essentially, he saw in the Darwinian mechanism of natural selection a way for God to act providentially in nature to create species. And so he thought he could Christianize Darwinism. I wasn't like into that or anything, but I thought it was a very interesting conversation between Darwin and Gray about the problem of evil and all this kind of stuff. Whole other video. But I finished my master's, but during my master's, I came into contact with a bunch of historical literature on the abolitionist of the slave trade and then of slavery, because controversies arose between the design people and the evolution people about whether or not Darwin's ideas fueled Hitler and whether Darwin's ideas did evil in the world. And so the Darwin industry, which I was kind of a part of, I was part of this, I was a fledgling up and coming scholar in the Darwin industry. And by this time, as I was finishing my master's, I was going to move on to my PhD, and my PhD was going to be on the metaphysical foundations of Darwin's Descent of Man, because I probably never will get to write this book, but I was arguing, and I think could easily argue and show that Darwin's theory of the descent of man via natural selection from lower animal organisms, what Darwin wanted to put forward, the idea that man was not made in the image of God, that man was not different from the other organisms, other creations, not different from them in an ontological sense that man was made in the image of God, but he was just a different degree. He was of a greater degree. It was not different. We would just, man put satellites in space, and monkeys, use sticks to eat ants. And it's just a difference of degree. It's not really a difference of the kind of thing they are, right? And Darwin wanted to show that, and he wanted to prove that in The Descent of Man, and show the evolution of man's not just body, but mind and morals. And so I was showing that Darwin actually wanted to show that before he had any kind of mechanism, and that he went in pursuit of the origin of species because he wanted to explain the evolution of man. Also another video. But so I had a whole big dissertation on that, and in the process of that dissertation, ended up reading a book by Adrian Desmond and James Moore called Darwin's Sacred Cause. And in Darwin's Sacred Cause, they put forward the thesis that part of Darwin's motivation in The Descent of Man was to show that all human beings were related by common descent from a similar ancestor, from the same ancestor, and therefore slavery was wrong and cruel because it was mistreating our fellow man. And they were making the case that he was an abolitionist. Well, he was related to some actual abolitionists. He was related to Josiah Wedgwood, and Josiah Wedgwood had designed the abolitionist symbol from the 19th century, the Am I Not a Man and a Brother symbol, and Darwin had married into that family, and all another lecture. And but anyway, I was looking at this, and it just seemed strange to me. From the stuff that I had read in philosophy and apologetics and things, I already knew that Darwin did not believe that man was made in the image of God. And I knew enough to think the abolitionists of the slave trade and the Am I Not a Man and a Brother people were believers that man was made in the image of God, and that man, black, white, everything in between, had one father in Adam, and Adam was made by God and created in his image, and that we were all of one blood. And so I went and I looked at the abolitionists of slavery and abolitionists of slave trade. And sure enough, they were all hardcore about man being made in the image of God and man being valuable because of the incarnation of Christ, and that Christ became human in order to die for humans, to redeem humans. And this is something that I believed and I was committed to, but throughout this whole period in college, even though actively going to ministries and Christian stuff, still not yet as committed to following Christ as I am now, though I, could be more in the future than I am even now. Because I think this whole time, I'm not telling this story, but this whole time, the Spirit of God has been working on me in various ways to sanctify me, show me things, teach me, guide me into a more greater truth, right? And obedience. And so anyway, reading about this and reading about Darwin thing, I had to have a chapter in my dissertation, and as I was planning that out, I fell down this hole, and I started reading all these abolitionists of slavery. And the abolitionists of slavery, like the slave trade, William Wilberforce, Thomas Clarkson, all those guys, whether you're talking about those kind of guys or the Equianos, they were all Christians. They were all hardcore Christians. That part of their story as to why they were trying to abolish the slave trade was the fact that they just loved God and took His commandments to love their neighbors as themselves seriously. And I'm getting really cold, so I've got to speed this up. But I saw in these men and women that they were the kind of Christians who laid down their careers, because a lot of them could have been like prime minister and like leading barristers and great men of the state and great artists and great, just all these, great writers and orators, and they gave it all up to try to establish justice and equality for their fellow man, their fellow image bearers who were of African descent, and others. Wilberforce did a lot for the African, to abolish the African slave trade, but he also did a lot for, prison reform and all this sort of stuff. So anyway, it was about there and then that God broke me again and said, hey, I saved you, you recommitted, and now you're here, but you still kind of have your own idea about how you're going to live, what you're going to do, and that's not what I want you to do. I want you to do what the Wilberforces, the Garrisons, the Frederick Douglasses, the Harriet Tubmans. I want you to be like these Christians. And I became convinced, kind of, like God was telling me to do this, but I didn't have to kick against it very much. But I tried to stick around in school to finish the PhD, but each day that I would go to a coffee shop or go to my office back here, I'd open up my computer, and rather than click the little file on my dissertation, I'd click a different file, and it was like taking notes on the abolitionists of the slave trade and what they did and what they believed and why they did what they did and different things. Well, at the same time, still going to a local church, that same church, Trinity Baptist Church here in Norman, Oklahoma, I had kind of enrolled into a class called the Round Table, and the Round Table was like a small group of men that met with the pastor, and he gave us like these topics to defend, and we had to take those topics and defend them, and in a round table situation, like to train on how to debate and discuss things or whatever. I didn't really learn much about debating and discussing in there because we were all doing it inside of a pastor's office. We weren't doing it on the streets and stuff. So really the best place, it's good. I'm not knocking it, but if that's all you do, you don't really get very good at it. You don't actually go do it. You go do it by going and doing it, and then you get better at it. And that's kind of like what you see on the videos over at the Abolitionist Rising channel. But I was given the topic of pro-life, and early on, the topic of abortion, and the topic of euthanasia, and the topic of in vitro fertilization during an ethics course there in the Round Table, and I had to defend my views on those things. And at the same time that I was meant to be studying and defending the pro-life position, I was reading and studying the abolitionists of slavery, in particular Elizabeth Hyrick, British, and William Lloyd Garrison, America, George Bourne, America, Elijah Lovejoy, America. And I was reading about all these things, and this kind of big, massive debate going on among the abolitionists of chattel slavery in America was immediatism versus gradualism, immediatism versus incrementalism. And I noticed that same debate was going on between Wilberforce and his abolitionists and the gradual anti-slavery abolitionists of the slave trade, the gradualists of the slave trade. And then I was studying that historically here at the university, just while studying these lives and thinking, man, I need to be like these abolitionists and devote myself to loving my neighbor. And then at church, they were saying, hey, here's this abortion issue. So I'm studying the abortion issue. When I go to defend the pro-life movement is making all the arguments that the opponents of the abolitionists in the past made. Arguments in favor of taking steps, in favor of compromise, politics, you got to compromise, in favor of regulation over abolition, all the things that I'd seen that had delayed Wilberforce's abolition bills, all the things that had been used to keep people from getting in line and supporting William Lloyd Garrison's National Anti-Slavery Society in America. All of those ideas had been foisted upon the American people through the pro-life movement, and I was seeing them once again through the anti-slavery gradualists. All those ideas had been foisted upon the American people then, and now they were being foisted upon them again. And so it all kind of coalesced and came together, and it was like, this is what I'm called to do. I am God. I was very quickly convinced and knew and understood it, as well as I understand it today, really, that there needed to be an abolitionist movement in America. It needed to learn from the past abolitionist movement, not just everything they did, but the good things that they did, not the bad things, the good things they believed, not the bad things. Learn from the past and then apply what was true from the past to the present, and that we once again needed to go to war with the things, the ideas that delay abolition of the evil of our age, that delayed the abolition of the evil of the previous age. So the abolition of slavery took time. Why? Not just because people wanted to be slaveholders or slave traders. That was part of it. So that was the national sin. But the other thing that was delaying it is that the Christians were all scattered and following other ideas and believing that they weren't under the judgment of God, believing that they didn't need to make it a spiritual issue. They didn't make it an issue of church or church discipline. And so the abolitionists of the slave trade and the abolitionists of chattel slavery were delayed by a certain set of ideas, which I saw delaying the abolition of abortion. In fact, I looked around and I didn't really even see anyone calling for the abolition of abortion. I saw people calling for like abort 73, like all good stuff in the sense of save the babies, defund Planned Parenthood, start with saving babies in the late term, and then maybe fetal pain, and then second trimester and first trimester, all the same incrementalism that was now seen by historians and scholars and people who studied the abolitionist movements of earlier ages, all stuff that was bad. I saw it all at work today, and keeping Christians from seeking the total and immediate abolition of human abortion. And that the reason that abortion is wrong was the same reason that chattel slavery was wrong, because human beings are made in the image of God. And as image bearers, we do not have the right to murder other image bearers. It is a attack on God. Just like you can't enslave a man, it is an attack, biblically speaking, it is an attack on man. You can't treat a man like an animal, because man was not made as an animal, even though Darwin said he was. Well, all of that coalesced, came together, and I was very immediately convinced that I was being called by God to start an abolitionist movement in America, and that I would start at the local church, Trinity Baptist Church, and start an abolitionist society of Oklahoma. We had elders on the board. We had approval from the pastors. I had young men that I knew from college courses, and they were in the college, and young men and women that were young adults, Sunday school class my age, because by this time I was out of college. I was a PhD student, and I started an abolition society. Didn't know what to do, but I did know that I wasn't going to build our little society and what we did on the same principles or tenets or ideology and strategy of the pro-life movement, because the pro-life movement strategy, after studying it, and I read all the websites I could, I watched all the videos I could, I read all the books I could, I studied the Klusendorfs, I studied the Troy Newmans and the Frank Pavones, and I studied all the different things, and I was like, no, this is from National Right to Life all the way down to the ones that are showing the abortion images. There's a commitment to incrementalism. There's a commitment commitment to compromise. There's a commitment to sort of shelving the gospel and not making an issue of sin. I did not see tons about sin or salvation. It was kind of like a save the babies and then, if possible, save the child. I didn't see a connection of like the reason we're killing our children is because we're in rebellion, and the reason we're in rebellion is because we don't love God. And I didn't see any of that theological stuff. And so every day whenever I went to the office behind me or the coffee shop across the street and was supposed to be working on my dissertation, I was working on what would be the principles and the tenets, the ideas that we should build an abolitionist movement. Like the pro-life movement, secular big tent approach, saying spiritual things, but open to a basically secular, all are welcome approach. Opposite from the abolitionists of slavery, opposite from what I think we should do. Gospel-centered, opposite of man-centered, save the baby-centered, honor God, glorify God-centered, preach the gospel-centered, proclaim the gospel for individuals, the gospel for nations, cities, states, communities, peoples, families. Immediatism, not incrementalism. Trusting in providence, not pragmatism. Being theological, not secular. And so all that, and then finally, this is a work of the people of God, not a work of social justice of people who are not believers in the image of God or the incarnation of Christ. It would be followers of Christ. And actually, that was one of the things that just smacked me up back when the Darwin study, back when I was looking at Darwin and whether he was an abolitionist or not. All the other abolitionists that I looked at that were truly abolitionists, that truly had skin in the game, that truly were trying to abolish the slave trade and chattel slavery, auction block slavery in America, they were all Christians, and they were all talking about their love of God and their love of man and their desire to keep his commandments and to apply the golden rule for the sake of the glory of God and the good of their neighbors. And so that was what wasn't in Darwin, and that's what wasn't in a lot of the pro-life politics that I saw. And so all of these things came together, and in my little file, I just picked up the file and I began to write, these are the principles and the tenets upon which a modern abolitionist movement against abortion ought to be established. And that's what I did for about a semester. And then eventually I was like, man, I'm not working on my dissertation at all. At about the same time, I was the TA for a Darwin Dream course here at the University of Oklahoma Centennial celebration of Darwin's Origin of Species. And I eventually got ousted and found out, and the guy, you know, the chair of my doctoral dissertation, you know, finds out like I'm this religious nut bent on abolishing abortion. I'd started the Abolitionist Society of Oklahoma. We didn't know what to do, really. We went to the abortion mills to try to like preach and plead with women that were going in to terminate the lives of their children. We thought we should come out to the college campus and hand out flyers, and we put up posters and that sort of thing. And eventually I just kind of became ousted and had to talk to my professors and the chair of the department and say, this is what I'm going to do. I'm dead set on abolishing abortion and pursuing this. And instead of writing about people who did things in history, try to make history. Instead of admiring men who gave up their lives to love their African neighbors in the past, I'm going to give up my life to love my preborn neighbor in the present. And, the chair of the History of Science program at that time, Dr. Stephen Livesey, he just sat across the desk and he's just kind of like, okay, maybe you can go do that for a while and then come back and finish your dissertation or whatnot, I wasn't universal. Maybe I was appreciated as a student in the program. I'd received some awards and I was scholarshiped and I was a teaching assistant, I think, and I'd been speaking at a number of history of science, so I was one of the good students in the program. And so even though they had found out that I was this religious nut, they still probably thought maybe you get that out of the system and come back. Well, I never came back. I started the Abolition Society of Oklahoma. I got after that, and it was about the time that Facebook was blowing up. We put up, one of the things I did, learning from Josiah Wedgwood, was to make an abolitionist symbol that could be used. It's the AHA symbol, little AHA symbol that could be used for abolitionists to say, I'm an abolitionist, I'm not an incrementalist. I'm for calling people to repent of the sin of child sacrifice, sin of human abortion. Humans made in the image of God, incarnation of Christ, the two I's that make up the H and the AHA symbol. So I said, let's make a symbol, let's put it out there, let's get it on memes and posters and stuff. And it kind of spread on Facebook. And for So this is back in 2010 and 11 where I'm at right now. And in 2011, got after that and been doing it ever since. And so I'll end this video here. I was going to go into more of my testimony than I did and kind of catch you up to where I am now in my walk with Christ and things that I'm dealing with and things that I'm trying to, still put to death and things I'm trying to grow in and learn and do. But I'll end this video here. I just wanted to start kind of chronicling. I'm not a writer. I'm not going to write, a book, I don't think, about myself, but I wanted to at least start putting these videos out there because a lot of people, they see me just holding a sign and talking for 45 seconds to a minute on YouTube Shorts. And I just want them to know kind of what God did all the way back to whenever I was 10 years old to make me the kind of person that does what I do. And I'm not making these videos to gain fans or glory or anything. Again, I'm putting this on my own personal channel. Like, very few people are going to see this. But for those who are interested in why, it sounds bold, but why there is an abolitionist movement against abortion in the United States of America, it's because of different things that God's done in different people's lives. And I just want to tell at least my part of the story. Because I see the hand of providence all the way back, and that today I use the art, I use the philosophy, I use the history, I use the debates, and whereas I'll have to do a future video to talk about the fact that I come from sort of a fatherless home and I've carried things from that. I'll bring that up in future videos. But it's all God wanting something to be done in the world. And you have to kind of see that bit of an invisible hand whenever you're looking at where you're at now and what God's doing. And so so I don't know, take this as chapter 1 and I'll put together chapter 2 next time I can afford a sandwich. So now I got to go somewhere warm. Thanks for watching.